Welcome along to another Know My Faith Monday podcast, and my guest is Liz Moffit. Liz, thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
I want to jump straight in. You spent how many years with Jacob Duncani?
Well, I spent 4.5 years in Israel,
Yep.
and probably the first couple of years was in Jaffa House with Jacob Duncani, and then, but I stayed in connection with him.
Okay, so what got you there?
Well, in the first place, to be quite honest, I was studying at Bible College of Laidlaw, it's called Laidlaw, and actually they did a trip. They organised a trip to Israel, which was, and I'd always wanted to go to the Holy Land. This was 2012, so I put my name down and I was very excited to go on this trip. But as time went on, it became very evident that the teacher of this particular class was very much into replacement theology,
Right.
and into supporting the Palestinian cause against Israel's aggression. And so we were given a lot of material along that kind of line, and we were going to stay in Bethlehem.
That's with the Bethlehem College or the
the Bethlehem
Bible or whatever.
Bible
yeah,
Institute
Institute,
in Bethlehem in Israel. So as I had a pile about this thick of notes
Yep.
and reading, and I started to wade my way through it, and it really disturbed me. Like, I've always known that Israel has had a special place in the heart of God, that Israel is God's firstborn son. But I'd never really spent time thinking about it or considering it until that idea was really challenged by what was in front of me. And I decided that I couldn't go on this trip for my first time in Israel with any good conscience. So I pulled out of the trip.
Wow.
My mother was coming with me because it was combined with an aid organisation she was part of. And lost quite a lot of money actually, but I held on to my airfares.
So Israel, up until that point, was probably not important? And in reading this material, it became more important?
Yes, absolutely. I knew that Israel was important, but it didn't feature in my life. I didn't know any Jewish people. I didn't connect with any groups that were supporting Israel. You know, it was just something I knew from reading the scriptures, which I had a passion for, and studying them. And over many years, I understood just from the plain text that Israel featured in God's purposes, and God had a plan, past, present, and future for Israel. And so when that was challenged, I went back to the scriptures and back to the Lord, and I decided, no, my conscience will not allow me to be involved in an organization that wasn't there to bless Israel.
Yeah.
And I knew that from Genesis chapter 12, that God has promised that those who bless Israel, I will bless. And I didn't want to be involved in something that was not there to bless Israel. In fact, I would go as far as to say it was doing the very opposite. It was putting Israel in a very bad light, and it wasn't considering God's eternal promises to Israel. So it was from that point that I started to research and study for myself, and ended up going on this trip with my mother, by myself. And the interesting thing was, the first person I met as I came into Israel and hopped onto a bus route to drive to Jerusalem, where we were staying, was a Palestinian tour guide who spent the whole trip telling me how Israel had mistreated the Palestinians, and how they were victims of Israel's aggression. And
So you weren't on his tour?
no, I wasn't on this.
Your mum were there as private tourists, and this guy immediately starts.
Yes, he came.
Yeah.
It's like he planted himself next to me and started to promote himself as a tour guide, but a narrative that put Israel in a very bad light. And he kept calling the land Palestine. He never called it Israel.
Yeah.
And I just said to him, what was this land called during the time of Christ? And he almost spat it out, Israel.
Yeah.
And he actually went silent after that. He never talked to me again. But I came to see that there's a whole propaganda machine, if you like, for want of a better word, that is trying to promote this narrative to unsuspecting tourists. And but my own personal experience and being in the land for 4.5 years and hearing many people's stories and visiting the Palestinian territories and Samaria, I came to understand that the truth was far from what I had been told. Number one, in my class, and number two, by these people that I was meeting in the land. And so, in no disrespect to Laidlaw, I learned a tremendous lot of good knowledge from that Bible college. You know, we're talking about one class and we're talking about one teacher, and but that did concern me, and I did write to the management there and put it in black and white why I thought that this course was very unbiblical and also from a plain political level untrue. Yeah.
Okay. Would you say that God honoured you pulling out of that Bible college tour?
Yes. Yeah, he did. So I believe he really did. I really did discover a lot more truth. I was able to hear both sides of the story. I was able to spend that first time meeting and getting to know people. I actually even met the president of the Bible college that we were going to stay in, and began to understand how it all worked. I read a book, David and Goliath, by Rabbi Shimon's, who was a frontline reporter for 10 years. And that book really also was very, very well documented. Yeah. And it gave me a understanding of the way the media and the propaganda was working in the land.
Yeah. Sometimes you need that to solidify what you personally believe, isn't it? You know, you go, okay, up until now, because I mean, I'm the same. Up until now, yes, I know God's the God of Abraham. He chose the nation of Israel. Yes, Jesus came through that, etc., etc. Didn't factor so much on my Christianity until I delved deeper. Yeah. But sometimes getting the negative side coming in, it hunkers you down. Go, no, something's wrong there. I need to learn the truth that you wouldn't have done if you hadn't had that. Exactly,
and I needed to learn it from a pure political standpoint and practical standpoint as well as a biblical standpoint. Actually, I do believe that one of the greatest fulfillments of prophecy in modern history that really proves to us that the God of Israel, the God of the Bible is God, is that he did gather these people back from over 100 nations, and he planted them back on their land again against all odds.
Yes.
Against massive nations that tried to wipe them out in the very beginning of their existence. Israel, like in the biblical wars, won wars that they should not have won and survived to tell the story. Yeah. And so it's such a great miracle.
Don't mess with Israel. and don't mess with the God of Israel, because that's the... You know, my wife and I were just talking the other day about presidents of the United States, and obviously, whatever you think about Trump, he was very, very pro-Israel.
Yes.
And if you actually look at it, you find most of the presidents, they may not be pro-Israel, but they're certainly very, very wary about going against Israel.
Yes, and I think there's a deep connection between Israel and the United States, and I think it's ingrained into the people, the idea that we're called to bless and support Israel into their faith, you know. But there is a huge move across the globe to really undermine Israel. Like, if you think of the story of Ruth and Naomi, which is one of the stories I love from the Bible, if you look at it as a meta-narrative that describes that Naomi representing Israel, and then both Ruth and Orpah representing the Gentiles. And at that point where Naomi had lost her own faith. In fact, she wanted to be called Mara, which means bitterness, instead of, the pleasant one, Naomi. And it was Ruth that clung to her because she knew that Naomi's God was God, that Israel's God was the one true God. And it's an eternal covenant. We often hear these words said at marriage, this vow, where you go, I'll go, your people will be my people, your God will be my God, where you die, there will I die also, and there will I be buried. But it goes on to say, may God deal with me ever so severely if even death should separate us. It goes beyond the grave, that we are connected to God's covenant with Israel, which is an eternal covenant. And Orpah, when she was pushed, she turned her back on Israel. So Ruth means friend, and Orpah means the back of the neck. And I guess we have that choice. We come to those crossroads in our life too. And I came to that crossroad where I was challenged, and I decided to cling to Naomi, to the God of Israel, to her faith, to Israel's faith, to Israel's God, and to Israel's eternal covenant.
Right. Let's go from you and Mum on the bus to Jerusalem to working with Jacob Damkani
so Jacob,
in Jaffa.
Yes, and Jacob, I had met Jacob and spent a few days with him and Ifat as he was touring around New Zealand, because I was just coming into that place of exploring Israel and wanting to know more about it. So I joined them for maybe 5 or 6 days on their tour around the country. And Jacob and I really connected as friends, and he invited, and I told him that I was coming to Israel, and so he invited me to come to visit him in the land. And so when I went to Israel, actually this was my second trip to Israel. I went again 1 year later. So I had really got to love Israel and start supporting Israel and want to learn more about it. So in between my 2012 trip with my mother and the following year I went back for a couple of months, I met up with Jacob's ministry, and on the third year I went and stayed with his ministry.
So you went 3 years in a row?
Yeah, I went through.
I'm not talking to you anymore. The
third year was when I really connected and stayed and got involved in Trumpet of Salvation and helped on the team, and got to know the lay of the land and became very familiar with the teachings of Jacob Damkani. Yeah.
How was that as an eye opener, coming from his very, very passionate stance, his very passionate viewpoint?
That was wonderful. I love Jacob's passion and the incredible drive of his life. When he really came to meet Jesus as his Messiah, he said, "Show me if you are the Messiah, and I will be your slave for the rest of my life." And he really was a bond slave of Jesus Christ. He lived and breathed getting the gospel to his people, the Jewish people, and he's had such a huge impact on many believers in the land. Through his book alone, he has had a huge impact, Why Me? And it very clearly shows how he grappled with the scriptures in the Old Testament and really came to understand that Jesus was the Messiah of Israel, that everything that was written in the Old Testament points to Jesus. Jesus himself, he himself said that when he said the law and the writings, and the prophets.
You search the scriptures because you think you'll find the meaning of life in there, and they all point to me.
Yeah,
it's actually ironic when I was talking to you on the phone the other day, and just organising this podcast, and I walked back inside, and there's my grandson sitting there, and guess what book he's pulled out of the bookshelf? Why Me?
Oh, wow.
by Jacob Dumkani. I thought,
That's it,
well,
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
So what did you do with the ministry? What was Liz's role?
Well, we hosted people from, Jacob really understood the role of the Gentiles to provoke Israel to jealousy. And I think that was part of the secret of the success of what he did.
Yeah.
So he hosted Gentiles from all over the world, and he trained them on their approach to Jewish people and to share the gospel. And very effective, because right from the very beginning of Israel's story, in the Song of Moses, so right at Israel's conception as a nation, we have this song that they were to teach to all the generations. And in the middle of that song, it says, God is speaking to Israel, and he's saying, you made me jealous by what is not a God. You provoked me to anger by what is you made me angry by your idols, and you provoked me to jealousy by these false gods of yours, and so I'm gonna make you jealous by what is not a people, by the nations.
And it's right there. Starts off with the horse and rider thrown into the sea and goes right into that. God says it right. It's amazing when you look into that.
Yeah.
The kings of Israel.
Yeah.
So, Israel turns around to Samuel and say, well, we want a king like all the other nations.
Yeah.
And Samuel says, well, if you get a king, he's going to do this, this, and this. Well, you didn't need Samuel to do that, because Moses had said that hundreds of years beforehand, God had prophesied that this is what's going to happen to you.
Yeah.
It's all in there. And when you see that, you go,
Israel's
I never
history
saw that before.
is written in that song, But Paul picks up on that theme, of course, in Romans chapter...
It's either 19 or 11, something like that.
11 at the end.
Those important 3 chapters.
Those important 3 chapters, he picks up on that theme of, God using the Gentiles to provoke the Jews to jealousy. And it comes through in some of the parables too.
So how did Jacob see that? Because traditionally, the Christian church has not provoked the Jews to jealousy. Traditionally, and if you read books like, and we'll find it in the bookshelf here somewhere, like Israel Betrayed, you find the exact opposite, is that the church has purposely pushed down and pushed aside Israel, so that the Jewish people want nothing to do with the God of the Christians. So wondering where Jacob dealt with that. Yeah,
there's a book, and it's called Dr. Michael Brown, Our Hands Are Stained with Blood.
Yes,
That's
that's
another
a fascinating book.
And he's just redone it to talk about the anti-Semitism that's rising up in this generation, which is
in the church.
So this is tragic, and every believer that understands their role to provoke the Jewish people to Israel, to jealousy, and to reach out to Israel, should understand that. So I would say to read one of these books and become familiar with the history, because that is something that we are going to have to overcome if we're going to reach Israel. So Jacob had what was called the 3-legged approach, and number 1, encouragement. He would say, when you approach people, you need to tell them that their God is God. So
reaffirm them
as a people.
Your God is God.
The God, and to also to tell them, I'm sorry for what was done to your people in the name of Christianity. Because somehow, some way, in the Jewish mind, we are associated. We may not have done it ourselves or even supported what they did, but there is a huge association between the church, Christianity, and even the cross and what was done to Israel. So, that it's very disarming to actually really say, I'm sincerely sorry. And it becomes even more powerful if, say, a German person would say that to a Jewish person. It really is. It sort of cuts away at that blockage to hearing the gospel. And thank you as well. Thank you for everything that I love, everything that I value, everything that is dear to me came to me through your people. And for us, we might think of ourselves as whatever age we are. Some people 20, some people 50, some people 80, but a Jew is 3,500 years old, because they carry with them their whole heritage. They carry with them the pain and the victories of their past, and so we really need to learn.
We don't understand that so much, do we? But,
No.
and I think for us, because, and if I can say this without getting into trouble, as white New Zealanders, we don't have a cultural history so much.
Yeah.
I remember meeting a guy one time in Auckland. I went to a Derek Lind concert in Auckland. And this guy, Phil, was out the back. He had one leg. He appeared to be homeless, and I'm pretty sure he spent his pension money buying seedlings to replant what the city council had pulled out of the planter boxes.
Yeah.
And he was English, and I said, when did you come to New Zealand? He says, I was just a little kid. We had to come here when my father lost the family pub.
Yeah.
And I said, how long had the pub been in the family? And he goes, 400 years. I'm going, my country's not even 200 years. Your family owned a pub. You go to Israel.
Yeah.
And you have families that have been there, but you've got a nation that's been there. You've got a people that have been there that were founded when Moses took them out of Egypt 3,500 years ago. That's a lot more history than you and I can understand.
Yeah.
And have that baggage isn't the right word, but it's that cultural shoulder pack, I suppose.
Yeah.
To carry with us.
Yeah, the history. So that really does disarm them. Those three things: to encourage, to thank, and to say sorry. And it opens a way then to share from the Bible often. Yeah. And I've always felt that one of the most important things is building a relationship and an ongoing relationship with people. And, I have beautiful Jewish, Israeli, and even Arab friends from the land. And, relationship is another key, I believe, that we're not just connecting with people on the street and never seeing them again. And that's why hosting, in New Zealand, we have so many opportunities to, like when the
borders open again.
When the borders open again. I did that for 1 year in New Zealand. I hosted Israeli travellers through HIT, and I met so many young people, and got to, when people are eating in your home with you and sleeping in your beds, and you get an opportunity to build an intimate relationship with them, a strong friendship, and you get to share the gospel. You get to plant those incredible seeds, and I never underestimate planting seeds. The word of God is an eternal seed, and planted in the heart, God can water that at any time, and that seed can begin to flourish. And I've seen that many times worked out, where people have heard the faith years earlier, even in their childhood, and then later in life, God has poured water on those seeds, and they've sprung to life. And that is going to happen in Israel, because there's promises relating to Israel that all Israel will be saved, but how can they believe in the one they have not heard about? And that is right in the middle of those three very important scriptures in Romans chapter 10. How can they believe unless someone brings that message to them? So that is so important, that we, as the body of Messiah, play that role like Ruth played, and be a friend to Israel. But more than that, to actually speak the incredible gospel message that no one, neither Jew nor Gentile, will ever be saved unless they hear and respond to the gospel. So God's given us that incredible privilege, but it's also an awesome responsibility to bring that gospel to everyone. And it says in Romans chapter 1, to the Jew first. So
it's interesting when you talk about hosting, because Sharon and I have hosted as well. I don't know if we can in our current house. It's a bit small, although we do have the caravan, so they can stay in the caravan. But my faith pretty much grew out of this whole hosting thing, because one of the one of the first questions that Israeli Jewish travellers ask us is, why are you doing this?
Exactly.
And what we've found in amongst the hundreds of hosts around New Zealand is so many of them aren't able to answer that question.
Yeah.
You know, oh, we love Israel. Oh, okay. Why?
Yeah.
Not quite sure.
Well, I do believe, like I said to you, the gospel is the one seed that grows the fruit of eternal life in someone's heart.
Yeah.
And, Paul warned about preaching either a false gospel or not a gospel, a message that is not a gospel at all. He gave such a harsh warning in the scriptures about that. Don't distort this seed and don't water it down. And we have this responsibility to bring the gospel. But what our enemy wants to do, he does want to distort this seed, and he does want to water it down, and he does want us to preach a message that is hardly recognizable to the gospel, But we need to equip the body with the knowledge of how to approach people and how to bring the gospel. And that's why Jacob was so simple in his approach, but so effective.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to what's happening out there on in our own country today. We need to know what this gospel message is. I actually did a little bit of an experiment. I went and approached several people, and I gave them this big clue. I said, everyone comes into the kingdom exactly the same way, by hearing and responding to the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. Could you share with me your understanding of the gospel?
Of what the gospel is.
And,
so obviously you're saying this to Christians, not to non-Christians.
Always to Christians,
Yep.
pastors, children, different people.
Yep.
And, at that stage, no one that I asked at that time, including a couple of staff members on churches, was able to give an effective message. And I'm not putting the blame on them. I'm saying
It's a historical blame.
Yeah.
It's historical. We haven't been taught what the gospel is. We're taught this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah. There's been so much added to the gospel and so much taken away from it. I compare it like at one point I learned that, 85% of the world's food resources, the seeds, were interfered with so that you couldn't plant them and grow a crop. You would have to go to the sellers, to the experts, buy some seeds, plant them, and you couldn't harvest seeds from that crop. You had to go the following year and buy some more seeds. And this is not how God set it up in Genesis chapter 1. And I remember once the Lord saying to me, as in the natural, so in the spiritual.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I'm very committed to is equipping the body with an understanding of the gospel and how we can effectively share that. Because it says in the scripture, the gospel is bearing fruit in all the world.
Yes.
It's such a potent and powerful and eternal seed that if we could get the seed right, it's only naturally going to bear fruit. So
it's so hard. I'm in a discussion online at the moment with somebody with this, particularly, and I know I have this thing about the grace and the hyper grace movement, but there's all this thing all about God's grace and it's been given to me, and it's all true.
Yeah.
But the fact that I actually have a responsibility to pass that on.
Yeah.
That there is something called a Great Commission,
Yeah.
go into all the world and make disciples, teaching them to obey my commandments, and that's a responsibility of mine. But the arguments coming from the other side within the church that it's all about it's all about me and I've got to make sure that I'm right and this, that, and the other thing, that the whole people haven't been taught that we are supposed to go and tell others.
Yeah.
We've been taught to make sure.
Yeah.
Make sure I'm safe first, or make sure I'm safe, and make sure I get to heaven.
Yeah, and this is the same thing with the seeds. You can produce one crop, but it can't reproduce. And multiplication was God's concept. And the very, very first words that he ever spoke to humanity were to be fruitful and multiply. And Jesus said the same thing. He said, I have chosen you and I've ordained that you should bear much fruit,
Yeah.
and he was talking about the crop bearing fruit 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold, that there was to be a multiplication in our lives. And that can only happen when we stop having the experts or the leaders that we have to bring people to get to for them to be saved, that every believer is equipped. That word, the first time you come across that word equipped, that Greek word for equipped in the New Testament of the Bible, and it's mentioned 9 times in the New Testament, is when it says that the disciples, Jesus came past the disciples and they were mending their nets. And so, in a sense, the nets need to be mended. The first time Jesus sent them out to gather some fish, and he said, drop the
drop the net on the other side.
Yeah. It says that they got a great catch, but the boat began to sink and the nets began to break. And so, of course, the harvest was escaping. But, years later, after Jesus had spent 3 years with equipping them, he sends them out again to catch a great lot of fish. And one thing it does say, I think it was about 163, an exact number of huge fish, so they weren't little fish. And it specifically says in that verse, and the nets did not break. And they didn't break because the nets had been woven together, they had been equipped. And I believe that there is a huge part of the responsibility of leadership, not to be the specialists or experts, but to equip everyone to be priests, to be ministers, to be the experts that know how to share the gospel.
That's the fivefold ministry. And I've got to apologise because the putting the net on the other side, that was the second time.
Yeah, I realised that too as I was saying it.
The first time was just put your nets out during
Go
the
out
daytime.
again.
Yeah. But Lou Meyer, who we spoke to a couple of weeks ago, he says, the fivefold ministry, it's there to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, the prophets, the apostles, the evangelists, the teachers, the pastors, to equip the rest of us to do the work of the ministry. You don't say, well, you're the evangelist, you go tell people about Jesus.
No, absolutely.
It's to equip us, and that doesn't happen.
No, and I think it's one of the very key scriptures. Ephesians chapter 4 is a very key chapter in the Bible because it talks about a church that is mature and that is fulfilling its purpose, and that's what we need to get to.
I would reverse that. I would say that they are fulfilling their purpose. That's why they're mature.
Yeah.
I said to my wife the other day, Sharon's doing a lot of physical work. Most of my work is not physical.
Yeah.
And I said, I need to do some physical work. I'm feeling, she's feeling worn out.
Yeah.
I'm feeling worn down because I'm not actually doing anything physical. And I need to get out there and do something. And as Christians, we go, and you hear us all the time, I don't feel fulfilled in my faith. And go, well, no, because all you're doing is you're sitting there on Sunday morning listening to sermons and singing hymns. You're not doing what you're created to do as a Christian, which is to go and make disciples. That's why you don't feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
You will feel awkward when you start doing that because you haven't done it before.
Yeah.
But you keep doing it, you will start to feel fulfilled because that's what you're called to do.
Exactly, and that's where we need people to come alongside and really equip and really help people to do that. We go out on we've been going out on the streets for over a year now, maybe about a year and a half since I came back to Israel. We spent a season praying, and then we launched ministry again by just simply going into Garden Place. We're sitting in Garden Place here now and bringing food for the homeless and building relationships with people in the community. And we've since opened a cafe where we also provide food and relationship and, equipping. The next stage is we've got some good evangelists on our team to equip everyone so that they are able to get alongside people and bring this amazing gospel message, but bring it in love and bring it with, Jesus. Paul said, such was our love for you that we didn't just bring you the gospel, but our own lives as well. And that's the cost. It is, Jesus said, if anyone would come after me, there's a huge cost to pay, your life.
Yes.
And so we bring our life with the message.
Yeah, the whole, I don't know, the whole freedom, the gospel is free, doesn't cost you anything, is, well, yes and no. It costs me everything. And again, is it James or Peter that says, if you say, you find your brother who's destitute and hungry and got no clothes, and you go, have a great day. God bless you.
Yeah.
Where's the love of God in that? Interesting. How did so you're working with the homeless, the street people, the druggies and those. How did they react when you began this?
I think a little bit standoffish at the beginning, but after about a year, they really know that we're there for the long haul and that they're very respectful. Yeah.
We did it as a church in Auckland, and the first question, we did it up on K Road, and the first question was, I think it actually came from one of the prostitutes. It was like, oh yeah, how long are you going to be here for?
Exactly.
Because so many churches have done this, stopped, done it, stopped.
Yeah. And they have a lot of reasons why not to do it.
Yeah.
But we have one good reason why we should be doing it, because our Lord commands us to. He loves the broken. Yes, people might, a druggie's going to try and get money and to spend on drugs, but that doesn't mean we're not called to love them and bring a message that can transform their lives. Yeah. And that's a long-term journey to walk with people.
It's getting to know the people. We sometimes want that little notch, that little head count. Hey, we went out and we did street ministry, and we've been working with the homeless and the druggies, and we've got 15 people saved. You just notch off 15. It's not about that at all, is it?
No, it's about each person and their life and their needs, and introducing them to Jesus. This is something that I did for many years in Hamilton before I went to Israel, and before my husband was killed in an accident, and I had to. Israel was also a time of recovery for me, and prepared me to go back out onto the streets again. It's very interesting because a lot of seeds that we planted in young people so many years ago are now bearing fruit now, and we're seeing a lot of people coming back and connecting again with what God is doing and with their faith, and it's just a beautiful thing to behold. So.
Yeah, excellent. And this is your own ministry, or you're working out of a church?
This is a ministry of Graceway Church in Hamilton East, 69 Grey Street. I'm pastoring at that church, and my main focus is the community.
Which it should
and the gospel.
It should be. It's so... and again, with this doing thing, we know deep inside that we're supposed to get outside the four walls.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to get. Sometimes I think the best thing you can do is get a sledgehammer and knock those walls of the church down. Yeah. To get out, because we feel safe there, we feel secure. This, Sunday morning it's great. We've sing 5 songs, do this, have a prayer, whatever. It feels comfortable. I know I'm supposed to get out and do this thing.
I think it does. Personally, I think that God wants to transform the very understanding of what church is. The church is not an event. It's not a building. It's not an organisation. It's a family. It's a family on a mission. Yeah. It's a family business. And, so God wanted a family, and that family is to open up to the whole world, The Father said, He said to His Son, ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance. Jesus had a very big vision. Go into all the world and make disciples of all the nations. And, so I agree with you. I don't believe there should be a roof or walls around the church. We need to have a church without walls, a church that is open and inviting, a church that is made up of the body, that we are the net, that we are the house, that we are the boat, that we are the body, and that people come and be part of, and they're built and knitted into that grand design. I've been thinking about God recently as the grand weaver.
The grand weaver.
And he's weaving us together, and to make a beautiful temple that glorifies him, and a net that catches this huge harvest of the days that we live in.
I had a dream, or I think it was a dream, not a vision, years ago, when you talk about God as a weaver, and Jesus had this tapestry, and he had these multicolored threads.
Wow.
And so I was coming up to him from behind, right? And and he's got this thread, and he pushes it through and hooks it around, and he adjusts the thread so a particular colour is at the front. And as it happens in these dreams and visions, he happened to have the thread of my life in his hand. And so I said, "What's that?" And the different colours. Well, this black's the times when you're a bad boy, Rob, and the white's the times when you're a good boy. And I'm just about to put your thread on the tapestry.
Wow.
I said, "Wow, okay." So I watched him do it, and he adjusted it so the black part was at the front.
Yeah.
And I go, no, you can't do that. That's the yuck. That's the yucky parts. You got to put the white part at the front. And he said, "No, I need the black part at the front."
Wow.
I said, "No, I can't let you do that. That's the bad part of my life." And so he adjusted it so that the white part was at the front.
Yeah.
And then he said, "Do you want to see the tapestry?"
Yeah.
So I said, "Yes." So we walked around the front, and it was a picture of him on the cross.
Wow.
And in the middle of one of the palms was a little white dot.
Wow.
And it was just a message to me to remember that Jesus died for my sins, not for the good part about me, the bad part about me.
Yeah.
But he weaves the tapestry the way he wants it.
Well,
he does things the way he wants it. And Job says that, doesn't he? He says, shall we receive good from the Lord and not evil, and not bad stuff as well? Blessed be the Lord.
Amen. And Job also uses that particular word about God as a weaver. It's in the book of Job, and it's also in that beautiful Psalm 139, where he's weaving us
together.
Yeah.
Don't tell me God doesn't know about DNA and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting.
So just going back to your time in Israel with Jacob.
Yeah.
How did you feel? So I think most of the people that he works with are Gentiles, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you feel as a Gentile Christian working with this full-on, very, very powerful Messianic Jewish believer?
Wonderful. Yeah, he's very Jacob. He says, "I've got one foot in the boot of Paul and one in the boot of Peter." So he really relates well to Jews and Gentiles. As a believer.
Did you feel any compulsion to go, "Oh, I wish I was Jewish or more Jewish"?
No, I've never had that compulsion. God's made us all unique, and He's placed us all in His body. I from my Jewish friends, and some of my best friends in the whole world now are Jewish, because I spent so much time living, with people there.
Yeah.
Never even make you to feel like that. You kind of partner as what becomes your first identity is there is neither Jew nor Gentile. There's neither rich or poor, bond or slave, but in Christ we are all one. And I think that's a very important thing to know. It's a different role, but it's not a different value. Yeah. And I really do understand that about God. Yeah. Yeah,
because we so often what has happened in the past is that people have overbalanced, or Gentiles have. I don't think any of the Jews have overbalanced, but Gentiles have certainly overbalanced and go, "Oh, I need to be more Jewish." And God goes, "No, but I made you Gentile."
Yeah, or else they put they worship. They almost worship the Jews. Which is not a healthy place to go. These people, many of them are lost, and they need the gospel. They need us to love them, but not to worship.
I understand. I mean, I love delving into the scriptures. I love discovering the Jewishness of our scriptures and the Jewishness of our faith, but that doesn't make me want to become Jewish. Exactly,
and that means for me as a Gentile that I don't have to rearrange my life to this is personally to me. I don't rearrange my life. I've never felt a compulsion to eat kosher or to get involved in obeying all these Jewish laws
and regulations.
People would turn up with, Gentiles would turn up with strings hanging off them, and, the Jews would say that is kind of like a put-off, that a Gentile trying to be a Jew rather than accepting their own identity, and that's not that's not the best way to. We kind of come across as a bit of a weird.
We spoke to Yakov Brown a few weeks ago on exactly that thing. Is for him, that's natural because he's Jewish.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's discovering his Jewishness.
Yeah.
Through that, but again, you and I are not Jewish.
Yeah,
we can look into it and go, oh, actually, that little tassel that's there to remind them this, and this, but it's not an injunction on us.
No, that's right.
To start doing that.
And most of the Jewish people in Israel are very secular anyway.
Yeah.
So we would be doing more than they would be doing. Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing with again, we go back to the hosting of the Israeli travelers.
Yeah.
And a lot of problem that our hosts have had with that is you're not evangelizing an Orthodox Jew.
Yeah.
Right? You are befriending and welcoming into your home a secular Jew who, and it's a big if they believe in God, it is the God of the Bible. Yeah. But the bigger chance is they're either agnostic or atheist and don't believe in God.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah? So how do we as Gentile Christians share our Jesus with this Jewish person who doesn't even believe in Yahweh?
Yeah, that's right.
And again, that's where Know My Faith came out of. Is so many people, they have no idea how to do that.
No, that's right. But there's a couple of things. If you talk to a Jew. And go deep enough, drop a bucket into the well of his heart, I guess. Just about in every Jew, you will pull out a hope of a Messiah. It's something that's kind of ingrained into them. So there's a lot of that side of it, the hope of a Messiah. And most Jews have all the feasts and the traditions, and from those feasts and traditions, which are biblical, it is a great starting point. Yep. So there's a lot of common. It's not like you're dealing with a secular person here in New Zealand who may have no common ground with the Bible. Yep. It's just so ingrained into their culture and their society that you will always find a starting point from the Bible. I remember saying to a Jew on the street in Israel, what makes you Jewish? Yeah. And he said, my mother was born Jewish. And I said, well, what made your mother Jewish? And he said, my grandmother. And I could have gone on for hours like that, but I said to him, because the truth is, if you go back far enough, you can only land on Abraham, and you can only land in the Bible. And so the Jewish person, their whole life and history goes back to the Bible.
Goes back to the Bible.
Yeah, so it's wonderful. And we have rules in our society, don't talk about religion and politics, although a lot of people have broken that. In Israel, it's the opposite, You
do talk about it, yes.
Yeah,
we found that so strange because Sharon and I went there with our two youngest children for 6.5 weeks, which is now 4 years ago. I want to go back, Lord. And to talk about this such personal stuff that in New Zealand we go, no, don't go there, or the politics or whatever, that's just natural.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, they don't mind being uncomfortable.
We're the ones
they say if you put 10 Jews in a room, you will have 10 different opinions. Because
or 11.
Yeah, or 11. So it's true. Yeah. And the Arabs are like that. They don't mind engaging and loud. You look at them and they look like they're going to kill each other, and then they shake hands and walk and see you next week. The
conversation gets louder and louder and louder, and they're all good buddies. When you're talking about that, did you have much to do with the Arab believers when you were in Israel?
I didn't have a whole lot to do with the Arab believers, but I did have some Arab friends that were believers that I met. Lovely people. And I met some also Arabs that weren't yet believers. We had a big conference on the Mount of Olives, and with Tom and Kate Hess, and there were some Arab believers there, and my Israeli friends, that were with me, they really ministered to them, because there was a sense in that environment of feeling second rate, and these guys would never want them to feel like that. They're
so
cousins.
The Arab Christians felt second rate, or
the Arab Christians in this environment that was really honouring Jews, Yeah. And the truth is, Jacob always he had lots of Arab friends, and he called them our cousins. And we had a wonderful time. We went to a big Arab church that was outreaching to the Arab people, and really connected with some lovely Muslim Arab people, and also the Christian Arabs, whether they're born-again Christians or just traditional Christians, very persecuted in their own land. They are very persecuted by their own people, the Arabs.
It was interesting. While we were there, I spent a lot of time with the church, or the Kahila Haderek in Carmiel, which is, we had a sister relationship with our church.
Oh, yeah.
Sharon and the kids went to an Arab couple, Anis and Nawal, who have a ministry amongst the similar to what you're doing in Hamilton, with the homeless, with the underprivileged, with single mums. Anis went into every prison in Israel, bringing the gospel to the Arab people. And one of the discussions that I had with him was over the fact that he can trace his family in Israel back a long, long time. His family's been there for a long time. And he said one of the hard things, of course, is knowing that as an Arab Christian, he worships the God of the Jews.
Yeah.
That's a tension that we don't understand here.
No,
it's a tension that's very much so there between the Jewish believers and the Arab believers. In the land.
Yeah, that's right. But I think true born again, spirit filled lovers of God. There's that. There is this connection.
The Anis, again, if we go to the church that we're with, Yossi Ovadia, who is the pastor or the leader of the church, and Anis, very, very good friends. Yeah. So he's Jewish, Anis is Arab. And when the Kahila opened their new building, the two of them planted an olive tree out the front.
Oh, wonderful.
And that was just a symbol. And I know there is in the Lavi forest, they come together once a year. The Arabs and the Christians, the Arab Christians and the Jewish Messianic believers come together for this combined worship service to say, we are one.
Yeah, exactly.
In God.
Amen. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So what's next for Liz? Continue working with the people in Garden Place, pastoring the church?
Yeah. I think work while it is still day. Yeah, and put our shoulder to the plough, not look back, bring the good news, bring the love of God, and bring the gospel. And I hope that I'll be able to just host some trips, maybe annually, into the Holy Land. And there's such an enrichment that can come to our faith through visiting the Holy Land and bringing more dimensions to the Bible. So,
So if somebody's watching this podcast, what would, and they're going, actually, Liz, I like what you're saying, and I'd like to find out more about this Jewish side of it, because I've only been Christian up till now. Yeah. What would you suggest they do?
I would suggest that they engage with Messianic believers. Engage with them. Yeah, I would say they read some good books. Michael Brown on his show, on his radio show, once a week he does Thoroughly Jewish Thursday, and that's a great show to listen into and build up a knowledge of God's heart for Israel.
You can find that as a podcast, I'm sure.
Podcast. There's some really good books around. Jacob Damkani's Why Me is a classic. It's if you're interested in reaching out to the Jewish people, hosting Israelis. I didn't have a big house, and sometimes I had five 5 people in on mattresses and sofas and beds. So
Push the 2 armchairs together for the
yeah,
shorter ones. Yeah,
that's right.
How is Jacob at the moment? Because he's been very unwell, hasn't he?
Yeah, Jacob is very, very unwell, and I think there's a big transition happening in the ministry. But Elisheva still has a newsletter going out, and you can still contact Trumpet of Salvation and see the work that they're doing in the land. You know, Chosen People Ministries with Celebrate Messiah here in New Zealand is a great connection as well, and Scott Brown in the South Island. There's many ways to connect with Jewish ministry and Jewish people, but I believe that every single one of us should have an understanding and a arm that reaches out not only to the Jewish people, the poor people, the lost people. You know, there are some priorities that we all need to take heed to.
Yeah, Jesus said, "I came to seek and the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost."
Yeah,
that's Gentile, Jewish, Arab, whoever.
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you want to, if you do want to get involved and you're wondering, you know, what can I do? What information can I find? Just let us know in the comments, and we'll get a hold of you. Liz, thank you so much for coming in. It's been great.
My pleasure.
And the Lord bless you in your ministry.
Thank you. God bless you.